making what's unconscious conscious, developing a
Mm-hmm.
story to what has happened, connecting to our roots, developing a solid connection to our intergenerational stories, like
Yeah.
really writing a full encyclopedia about who we are, who our parents are, who our grandparents are, where there's trauma, where we got it, all of that stuff, our triggers, our wound, like literally know as much as you possibly can about yourself. And then once you have some of that information, insight, and awareness and everything, you can make better choices in your life.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Ask a Sex Therapist episode. Today we have a wonderful guest who has just written a book, and we're going to talk to you guys all about it. So, Todd Baratz is a renowned psychotherapist and sex therapist whose innovative approach to mental health and relationships has established him as a leading figure in his field. In addition to his clinical practice, Baratz is a prolific writer and speaker. His insights are regularly featured in various media outlets where he discusses topics ranging from romantic relationships to individual mental wellness. He lives in New York City and Los Angeles. Learn more on Instagram under his handle at Your Diagnonsense. Welcome, Todd. How you doing?
Hi, that's me.
I
I'm
love your
good. How are
handle.
you? Thank
Yeah.
you.
How did you come up with your Diagnonsense? That's pretty fun.
That's from Girl Interrupted. When
Oh,
Angelina Jolie says to Brittany Murphy, "What's your diagnosis?"
oh, I love that. I
Yeah,
think I just appreciate the irreverence as a
yeah.
fellow
I mean,
therapist and sex therapist. Um, yeah. How do you feel about diagnosing in general?
well, I don't diagnose any of the clients that I see.
Hmm.
It's not helpful for my work and what I do with them. So it's not helpful for me. Diagnoses, they're political, they're financial, they're philosophy. I mean, there's so much that goes into a diagnosis. So I don't really do that.
Yeah.
I could say I hate them, but I don't hate them. I mean, they're a way in which we think about mental health and mental illness. It's just
Yeah.
never been something that I've used in my clinical work
Yeah.
or
That makes
really
sense.
anywhere else.
That's part of why I've moved more towards coaching. So my private practice is coaching because I
Cool.
don't hate diagnoses or diagnoses either.
Hmm.
Um, but I look at it more as like a pattern. Like what are the patterns? Is this a helpful lens in terms of identifying a pattern, or is this just like pathologizing? And everyone's different. Some of my clients like to have a label, and I'm like, cool, you do you. Some of them
Yeah.
don't. Um, uh, so you just wrote a book. That's kind of
I
exciting.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is
so I
exciting.
have it here. Here we go for the audio people.
Woo!
I
Yeah, how to
accidentally
love
dipped it
someone
into the
without
pool.
losing your mind. Ooh, that sounds nice. A
Yeah.
pool.
Yes, it's nice to have a
I
pool.
fully support that. Put it in the
Yes.
pool, put yourself in the pool, put me
Yeah,
in the
so it's
pool.
already like warped. So I probably have like the first
Great.
worn in copy of your book within like the week of ordering it.
Awesome. Thank you for supporting me and ordering it.
Absolutely. So yeah, what made you decide to write a book?
Um, I mean, so many things. I love to write.
Okay.
And I've been doing a lot of writing for Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wanted to write a book. But the
Cool.
real reason, I mean, the idea and the reason behind the book was I've been in therapy my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Started therapy at 10, so it's been 27 years. My therapist literally saved my life, Derek. I talk about this in the book. It's a
You talk
main
about it a
story that I
ton in the
tell.
book. Yeah, like it
Yeah,
sounds like such
it's
a
a really big
unique
part of the
therapy relationship.
story. It has been unique, and he's almost like a father to me. And I saw him today. We had a great
Mm-hmm.
session. Still processing it. Need to
Mm-hmm.
stop fixating.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I had been in therapy and have been in therapy forever. I've been a therapist for like 13, 14 years and been on Instagram. And I noticed that there are just some similar themes that I was struggling with, my clients were struggling with, and people that I was hearing from on Instagram are struggling with.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, oh, this is a really great idea for a book. Also, I think it's really important that people who work and heal and healing capacities with others and helping capacities with others share and discuss how they've helped and healed themselves. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a really unique opportunity for me to share this unique relationship and how it intersected with some of my clinical, personal life, professional life, and Instagram life.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the book telling a story about me, telling a story about some clients, cases, couples, individuals from session, and then also what I hear from people and see online. So three stories, but one overall story of what we experience in life and love and the ups and the downs and all around
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah. I like what you're saying about you sharing your personal story and the importance of that. I do feel like in general in our society, like experts and people with credentials kind of get put up on this pedestal. Like we have everything figured out, which, I don't have to tell you is ridiculous. um, so I love the idea of just you kind of humanizing yourself and sharing. And you also talk about like in your training and in my training for sure, it's kind of like, you're supposed to be like a blank slate or like don't self-disclose too much to clients. So how did you
Mhm.
find what works for you as a therapist and human?
Yeah, all therapists get the same training in that sense. I don't think that
Yeah.
there's any program that's like disclose. Um, so, I mean, I got that messaging from my program, process why your client is sitting in the room, process why they're late, process why they are asking you personal questions,
Hmm.
process it all. I do process things with my clients, obviously, but in terms of disclosure, being on Instagram, being myself, I just always done that. When I was learning that stuff in school, I was like, okay, sure. And then I got to work in my own practice and I was like, same, same, same.
Right.
Um, and that's not to say that I'm talking about my mother and my father and cutting my clients off as they're sharing their personal traumas. It's just to
Oh,
say that I
right.
bring my whole self, and at times I'll share a piece of myself. Um, I mean, I'm on Instagram, and so I share quite a lot there. Sometimes I'm like,
Hmm.
well, that too much.
Hmm.
um, so I just try to be very much the same person in wherever I am. I don't know. So it's just always been a piece of who I am. But I know that it is,
Sorry, that's my cat.
um, like that. But most therapists don't, and that's okay too. I just my therapist had always disclosed and it had always been really impactful and powerful for me. Not,
Hmm.
I mean, just in terms of him being a human being. And so,
Yeah.
I model a lot of what I do based on what I received and
Yeah.
what I experienced as being helpful.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that's important for our field to at least have some different examples.
Yeah.
I've struggled with that idea too of like being a therapist, but also being a human, because it sometimes feels like the rules or the guidance of being a therapist means like that's supposed to come first before me, just like being Heather or you being Todd. And that also
hmm
doesn't seem like a really healthy example for our clients.
Yeah.
Um,
It's an odd thing to expect somebody to be really vulnerable while
mhm.
being cold
Yeah.
and withholding.
Yeah.
So I just try
Yeah.
to
So
be.
anyway, I appreciated that part too. Um,
Hmm.
what made you decide to become a therapist?
I mean, it's the same answer for all discussions, kind of. My therapist.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally saved my life. I had such a wonderful experience. And it's not like then I started seeing him at 15.
Hmm.
And so it's not like I was like, oh, gee, at 15, I'm going to become a therapist because this has been so great so far.
Okay.
Like when I say he saved my life, I quite literally mean it. I didn't think I was going to have a profession.
Wow.
So like at the time I was in therapy, I'd also started reading philosophy and like psychology early on. And that was also coming from him too. Like he would send me some articles like, this is what's
Hmm.
happening in your family. You might want to read this, whatever. And in learning that information, I had a panic disorder at the time, speaking of diagnoses. It's not like it took my panic away, but
Hmm.
it, I found solace in a lot of that information. I
Yeah.
found peace and being able to put a narrative to what I was experiencing internally and what I was observing in my family. And
Hmm.
so that was like an intellectual curiosity that I just kind of followed in college. And
Yeah.
then towards the end of college, I was like, oh, yeah, right. I do. I have a future. That's right. I have to plan for that future. What do I want to do? And I had already, I had been studying psychology and philosophy and anthropology and all this shit. And
Okay.
all of my friends were going to grad school to become a therapist. And I was like, I want to do that too. Obviously, that's like the duh.
Oh,
And so then it
interesting.
was like, it dawned on me then. But it wasn't like really until the third year of undergrad that I was like, I'm going to be a therapist.
Hmm.
I hadn't really thought that far in the future because I was still recovering from major traumas. But it was personal experience that turned to an intellectual curiosity that turned into further studying that turned into a goal.
Yeah. Like, hey, let's do this.
It's been a journey,
The journey is
a
never
long one.
over.
It's not over.
um, Actually, that kind of reminds me of a question. I'm curious what you think about this. Sometimes I feel this way. I also hear this from my clients where it's like, oh my God, have I not finished addressing this yet in therapy? Whether it's like your
No.
issues with your parents or your attachment styles, and I know you have some feelings about that. But is it kind of like, okay, can we be done now? Like, have I healed enough?
Oh my God, I fucking wish. I mean, I'm no longer like doing coke at 7 in the morning and cutting myself. I take really good fucking care of myself and I can
Yeah.
regulate whatever, but my traumas still are part of me and are mine to manage and are triggered often in my relationships. When things surge or become really powerful, I say the same thing to my therapist. I thought I was done with this.
Yeah.
Even still. And then I'm reminded and I learn something new from it and then I move on and then it comes up again a year later.
I
It's
know.
ongoing,
I
depending on your
know.
experiences, depending on your traumas. It's kind of, this is just our thing in life to carry.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
everybody has some version of that, but varying in intensities.
It's also fascinating to me that like some people don't work on healing ever. Like I don't even get
Yeah.
that.
So their denial is really powerful for some people.
Yeah. I think for most people.
Yeah.
Um so you talk about the idea of not trying to like find ourselves, but
Mm.
becoming more of ourselves. And I would love to hear more about that. Like what is that becoming?
I wrote that and I've been asked this question. And to be honest, I thought it sounded better. I thought it sounded better. I thought
That's
it
so
was more
honest.
congruent. I thought it was more
Yeah.
congruent with the experience of like self-discovery that,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like someone's like manifest in a relationship or you find a relationship. It was a nod
Mm.
to that, that you more like build a relationship. You don't just find one. And it's not
Yeah.
like we find ourselves. We build and explore and discover and become ourselves. So on one hand, I just liked the way it sounded better. I thought it
Yeah.
sounded better. And then on the other hand, to me, it means more. It's just a deeper, more complex understanding of who we are and who we are to become.
Yeah.
Because so often our self is framed as something we find, end of sentence, period, done, great,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just not how it works.
Mm-mm.
I could land on some grand insight today and be like, I never realized that this is something I am and I've done and I need to work on. And then next week I could be like, oh my God. And then, it's like
Yeah.
it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to convince themselves otherwise, again, denial, emotional repression, all of those things.
Yeah.
But okay, I take it back. It's not because it sounds better. It means more. It means more. It's more
Yeah.
real. It's more realistic. We become ourselves every day and for the rest of our lives. We don't just find ourselves. But I guess you could say we find
Yeah.
ourselves every day. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. You're right. It's a little bit of like semantics. But the
Yeah.
becoming does sound better, I think. To me, it sounds more like internal. It's like this internal
Yeah.
process where the finding sounds a little bit more like
Yeah.
external.
It's just a little bit more accurate to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think about someone like going on a trip to find themselves or something. And it's
Yeah,
like,
that's what I did, and it didn't work. I found myself for like 3 days, and then I was back from Ibiza, and I was like, "Where the fuck am I?" I was
You're
like,
like
have to
nothing.
find myself all over again. Nothing changed.
You didn't magically discover everything in Ibiza?
No,
Okay.
I did
Well,
learn a lot though. It was a
that's true. I
retreat.
do think we learn a lot from traveling. I'm a fan. Um, okay, so I also wanted to ask you about. Okay, this one is actually very interesting to me. Like, you're kind of pro clinging in relationships.
Uh-huh.
Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Okay, say more
yeah.
about that.
You're looking at me like, I mean, clinging, like catching feelings, being needy is this like social stigma that I just
It
can't seem to
is.
understand.
Yeah, it's
Don't
like
catch
ugh, you're
feelings,
being
don't get
vulnerable.
attached,
Gross.
how not
Yeah.
to. Yeah, when like if you want to be in a relationship, part of
Hmm.
being in a relationship is quite literally and sometimes physically clinging to another person. And if you
True.
can't, that's kind of a problem. If being close, if being dependent gives you anxiety, that's going to create issues in your life and in your relationships. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's just my response to so much stigma and so much just shittiness around the value of someone who has specific attachment needs around wanting to be close a lot, wanting
Yeah.
attention, wanting to get affirmation, wanting to spend a lot of time together, wanting to get text messages, wanting things that are relationally intimate and emotionally deeper is, I think, something that's a strength that
Yeah.
somehow has been reframed as a negative, how to train yourself not to be. So I say don't stop being clingy, not in terms of that real dysregulated, anxious calling 30,000 times. That is not what I mean. That is a
Right.
completely different story, which people
Yeah.
often go to the extreme, which drives me insane. But I mean more so being attached, being
Yeah.
vulnerable, deepening intimacy, and looking and participating in all of the behaviors in a consistent and frequent way that deepen intimacy. It's important,
Yeah.
it's a strength. We need it. Relationships thrive on it. So if anyone is listening and you think you're clingy and it's a bad thing, it's not. It's also something important to understand that the person doing the evaluating of us being clingy or needy is usually somebody who cannot fulfill those needs, is usually somebody who struggles
Like
to cling.
100% of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a subjective experience. There's no kind of
Yeah.
factual basis for what clingy means and where it's bad. It's really
It's
just
true.
a term used by people who can't accept clingy behavior from others.
Yeah. I remember in grad
So
school, I had a therapist and I was like, oh, I feel like I'm just too needy, or I forget what I said. And she was like, okay, what if you are? I was like, what?
yeah,
Like, stop the
what if you
presses.
are?
Like, how can that possibly be okay? Because, that was a long time ago, but like, yeah, the messages are kind of loud and clear. It's like, you should be kind of cool or almost like aloof and like
So
mysterious.
stupid.
And
No mystery.
yeah,
Oh my God. A fundamental part of all relationships is unknown. So it's like the
right.
idea of creating mystery is wild to me because it's like there's built-in mystery. You don't need any more. Trust me.
I tend to agree with that there's built-in mystery. I think sometimes we forget that there's built-in mystery. And like when I see couples who have been together for like 10, 20 years, they think they know everything. Like they don't have conversations because they assume they know their partner's answer. Um,
Yeah.
and then we'll have the conversation in session and they're like, oh, maybe I wasn't totally right.
Right. Didn't
But
really know.
I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, how do you almost like remind yourself that there is mystery when you've been with someone for a long time?
Well, when I say mystery, I don't necessarily mean knowledge or specific information. I mean,
Mm,
there's a dynamic with two individuals with two separate histories, likely with two separate traumas. Then there's that dynamic when they come together. And can we be sure of person A or person B's motivations, true, unconscious, anything we don't, there is a wild card in all of our relationships that's kind of like trying to walk through or drive in a really foggy, with a fog. What am I trying to say? To drive down a street with a lot of fog. Sometimes we
mm,
can't fully see what's happening. And
hmm.
that's it. That ambiguity is part of all relationships. So again, not necessarily the absence of information or knowledge, like what's your favorite colors or shit like that, or where do you want to be
Right.
touched, which is often partners don't know when I ask in session, which I'm sure you have that experience too.
Uh-huh.
I mean more like just like the fundamental aspects of all relationships is that there's a fuck ton of anxiety always because we don't know. They're insecure. They can end. People can
Yeah.
just peace out. Two, they're ambiguous. So there's built-in mystery unconsciously. We don't know what the fuck is going on in one person,
Yeah.
let alone two. So, there are many aspects that fundamentally define a relationship that revolve around this type of unknown. And that's what I mean by mystery.
That makes sense to me. And the unknown is, I think, like the most scary thing, probably for
Terrifying.
me, but
Yeah,
I think for
it's
most humans.
terrifying. I want to know everything, especially a
Yeah.
therapist. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Why do we think we're in this profession?
I just want to get in there and understand all
I
the
want to know
things.
absolutely everything. Yeah. Let's
It
figure
is
out
such
your
a
unconscious too.
yeah.
My partner's like, do we need to talk about this still? I'm like, but I want to know. And he's like, but I don't want to tell you. I'm like, what? This isn't going to work. I need to
It
know
is such a
everything.
it's such an interesting job because I mean, like people come and tell us the things they tell no one else,
I
especially as a
know.
sex therapist too. You know,
Yeah.
it's like people tell us things all the time that they haven't told their partner or their best friend or their family, and I don't know. I think it makes it. I think it can make it interesting, and like for me at least, like in my personal life, because I'm so used to these like intimate conversations that I'm kind of just like, okay, can we cut the crap? Can we just like say how we're feeling? But not everyone operates that way.
Yeah, sometimes I catch myself asking questions that I'm like, are unboundaried. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't a session. And then I'm like, I'm so sorry, you don't have to answer that question. But especially in my relationship, it's hard because I think in a very specific way
Hmm.
and want to process in a very specific way, and not everybody wants to do that. And
Yeah.
should they? I don't know. But yeah, it's
Yeah, I don't know
interesting.
either. I had an experience with a friend recently where I think I kind of did the therapist thing and I was sort of like, let's talk about our feelings. And then yeah, I don't think that's how he works. I don't think that's how he wants to work. And he kind of made a little jab the other day of like, oh, well, I know how you like to have everything talked about. And I was kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're like, yeah, I do. Because I
Yeah.
think that's functional and healthy. Do you
Right.
not?
Like,
But is it? I
correct.
don't know. Yeah.
No, I question that too because sometimes I'm like, not everything needs to be talked about to death. You know, it's kind of like
Yeah.
there is a balance there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out.
Same. I'll let you know if I do. Okay, so let's talk about social media because I think your Dying Nonsense account kind of started in response to sort of there is like this weird trend of like people are like diagnosing themselves with like
Yeah.
relational issues and mental health issues based on social media.
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of like porn. Social media is the only place that people can really get access to
Oh, that
information
makes
about mental
sense.
health. And so people don't know what they're doing and have been told,
Yeah.
a gazillion toxic things by their family and culture. And so then they open an app and the app says, this is bad. This is toxic. They're a narcissist, if blankety blank. You're codependent. And they're like, oh my God, this is totally what's been happening for me.
Right.
Um, so people are really suggestible. I mean, I wish I had access to information when I was younger. That would have been helpful. It would have felt
True.
like less of a freak for feeling things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's all become social values in terms of how we approach ourselves and others based on a lot of this content that's being created, the listicles of what everything
Mm-hmm.
means. And they're based on these social values about how life is meant to be lived or how relationships are meant to be. Um, and it's bittersweet because some of it's really great and some
Yeah.
of it's really shit. um, to be
What are
blunt.
some of the shit
Uh,
patterns that you think are
oh, I don't want to
maybe
say. I take it
causing more
back.
harm?
I'm
What would
not
you
saying
say?
any. No, no. Okay, I take the shit word back. That's
Okay.
extreme. I'm tired.
It's okay.
I would just say that there's a lot of posts, including some of my own, that really lack a lot of nuance, or depending on the
Hmm.
reader, lack nuance. Because we're all biased and we are going to interpret things the way we want to interpret them.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, anything to me that's like you're this if you fit this top 10 list of
Yes.
anything, it kind of gives me the ick. Or anything that's like, you are dating a narcissist if they blankety blank blank
The
blank, or
narcissist one drives me
um,
crazy. Everyone's a
yeah,
narcissist now.
everyone's a narcissist. And they
Yeah.
probably are. I don't know, but it's still not helpful to be on the lookout. Um, Stuff like that. I'm not into that, or like, don't talk to your ex ever, or
Right.
these kind of really rigid,
Just
inflexible
the
beliefs
yeah.
that
Yeah.
end up creating shame for people. It's just really sucky. But the reality is that it's a cultural thing, and it's all being expressed on social media, especially
Hmm.
relationships. Like any relationship problem now is being reframed as unhealthy. Like any
True.
problem, it's like unhealthy. That we're kind of expected to be healthy automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in any way, relationally, sexually, emotionally. And, unfortunately, that's just not how it works because we live in this culture that's incredibly toxic and gives us absolutely no information. If anything, the patriarchy and all of the isms and the oppressiveness of it all makes it worse.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, there's a chapter in my book called Everyone's a Little Unhealthy, and that's why.
Right.
Because we can't expect ourselves to be healthy. And all of these posts online and everywhere else, they're really aspirational and idealistic that I think there
Yeah.
should be like a little caption at the bottom that says, this is not based on reality. This is
Right.
after you like learn about your emotions. This is
Right.
after you take a communication class. Because it's
Right.
like, everyone's like, we're terrible communicators. It's like, yes, of course you are. Everyone's a horrible communicator. Like,
Horrible.
we learn more about math and driver's ed than we do about how to like give an apology. Like, no one's a good communicator.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that kind of more of expansive approach that I think we really need.
It would be, I mean, I know there's some schools out there that actually have like a social emotional curriculum, but I
That's
agree. It's like
amazing.
we're just so like ill equipped for this stuff, you know? Like I certainly didn't get, examples of how to communicate from my parents. I definitely got
No,
examples of how not to communicate. No
exactly.
offense, mom and dad, if you're listening. Like, you know, um, because they also didn't get examples. It's like nobody is taught this stuff, and we're just kind of a bunch of like messy humans trying to figure it out. So I think that chapter and that idea that like we're all a little unhealthy is kind of important. It's like, let's just normalize it. Like, we're all just doing the best we can. And also, that doesn't mean you have a pathology or a diagnosis, or something is like inherently like extra special wrong with you. Sometimes I think a lot of us like to think something's extra special wrong with us, you know?
Everybody thinks that. I mean, I don't know about your clients, but all of my clients come in thinking, they're doing life, relationships, sex desperately wrong. And
Right.
what's worse is the thought that they're doing it wrong, not what they're actually doing.
Yes. And I mean, I think that's one of the big gifts of our job is like, I am under no illusion that anyone has it together. Like I know
No
that
one
like no
does.
matter how much money someone has, no matter how much, fame someone has or how awesome their relationship seems or how many trips they take to fancy places, it's like they don't have it together. It doesn't matter. No one
No,
does.
no, everybody struggles.
Yeah.
It's part
Yeah.
of
So anyways, I hope
being a
I hope
person.
people it is. It is kind of just being a person. Um Yeah. So one of the things you also talk about is, actually changing patterns, like the work that we do with people as therapists. So how do we kind of actually make change in your opinion? And like, how do we actually overcome some of those, patterns, whether they're from childhood or, later on in life that aren't really serving us anymore?
Well, you have to want to make change, like really, really fucking want it,
Number one. Yes.
in a very exaggerated, outrageous kind of a way. Like full
Hmm.
commitment. Life depends on it. Ruthless change.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, there's just so many different ways to make change. But for me, usually in session, it's two different things. One, developing insight, learning information. And by insight and information, I don't necessarily mean, psychoeducation and psychology 101. I mean, making what's unconscious conscious, developing a
Mm-hmm.
story to what has happened, connecting to our roots, developing a solid connection to our intergenerational stories, like
Yeah.
really writing a full encyclopedia about who we are, who our parents are, who our grandparents are, where there's trauma, where we got it, all of that stuff, our triggers, our wound, like literally know as much as you possibly can about yourself.
Okay.
Um, and then once you have some of that information and insight and awareness and everything, you can make better choices in your life.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Or you can at least be kinder to yourself while you make shitty decisions. But so that's a really big part of change. Also, just doing things. I mean, sometimes you don't necessarily need a whole A to Z encyclopedia in order to make a decision that leads to change.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes change, not sometimes, but change is always action oriented. We can't just develop awareness and bippity boppity boo, change.
Right.
We do have to take steps, and usually that involves feeling uncomfortable, feeling very afraid,
Mm-hmm.
um, And it's through those experiences that we create change because we're then confronted by something new that challenges our brain to think differently.
Yeah.
It's called a corrective emotional experience. I write about this in my
Mm-hmm.
book. I'm sure your clients have it with you in session.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when when we're confronted by experiences that are incongruent, maybe with some of the negative beliefs we have about ourselves, others, or the world. And it slowly starts to shift the way that we think, which
Yeah.
slowly starts to shift the things that we do.
Yep.
But it's complex. I mean, you can also just do something. Like, without any awareness, it's been like, I want to make this change. And some people just do it and it changes their lives and they have no awareness. I mean,
That's true.
I don't, who cares? Who cares? Just
Yeah.
do things, make change.
Yeah.
But, basically what I'm describing is really a very active approach to life. Not this gut instinct, not this like what my mama told me stuff. This real kind of like if I were to learn any skill, if I were to teach myself the guitar, this is what I would have to Google. Maybe I would get a teacher and I would have to practice and I would have to read
Right.
a book and I would have to
Yes.
practice the chords. And it's the same exact thing. It's change is a skill. And, there are very active things we have to do to develop that skill.
There are. And that is very real. And I don't know if people like realize how much work goes into therapy. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'll
Yeah.
just hire this person and they'll help me have insights for this hour. And that might help like at a very like slow rate. But yeah, it really is having those experiences that I think cements the changes.
Yeah.
And the practice, like you said, and the being willing to get out of the comfort zone. And to realize
Totally.
like, don't at least this is my feeling. Don't like outsource your change to me. Like I can be your guide, but like honestly, you're gonna have to do all the work. So
100%.
yeah. And it's a lot of work. and then
It's a
and
lot
then
of
I
work.
feel like I'm someone who's done a lot of work. And I also feel like there's moments where I'm like, have I made any progress?
Of course.
And then I'll be like, okay, I have, but we can get frustrated and can be very up and down. And it's not like a linear process. So, but yeah, it's like life is going to keep lifing and we're going to, hopefully keep humaning. And so you might as well like try and grow and learn and enjoy it a little
Do
bit
something.
more.
Read a book. Read my book. Go to yoga. Take a
Todd's
class.
book.
Google.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of access.
Your book was interesting.
Now.
I mean, the title of your book is interesting too. And it was very intriguing to me, how to love someone without losing your mind. And I'm like, is it possible? Like, is it possible to not lose your shit in a relationship?
No, that's not the point. The point is that you will lose your shit. It's sarcastic, but I wonder if people get that.
Well, I think it's good though if you lure people in anyways.
Life, you're going to lose your mind. It's really hard. That's the whole thing I was saying about expecting health. We can't really. We've never learned. So you gotta learn.
Like, why? It's a weird question, I guess, but like, why do you think we keep trying to have relationships and like specifically romantic relationships?
Because why do we have relationships?
Lose our mind, but we keep going back for more, even though we
because they feel good. That's because it feels
sometimes.
Nice. Sometimes, hopefully, that would be the goal. You're in a relationship for it to feel good. And then, then maybe it doesn't feel good and you end it and then you get another relationship. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, how do you kind of discern, or how do you help people discern when it's feeling good enough and when it's, time to go?
I mean, that is the question. And there's no matter how many guidelines you can give someone or yourself, attachment trauma, etc., is going to push you in one direction or the other, and you're going to be walking against hurricane force winds. It's really hard to end a relationship, like really fucking hard. Even if you know it. I mean, I went through that with my ex, and I loved him to death. I knew that it wasn't working, but I couldn't end it. It took me a long time. And I talked to so many people who are like, I need to end it, but I can't do it. I should do it. I feel, what's wrong with me? And like, nothing's wrong with you. Ending relationships is just really fucking hard. So I don't usually like giving these like lines. Most people know. Most people know when, it's not working, if they can't accept their partner, if they've tried to change it and nothing changes. Most people, I think, know. But what I always tell people is to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at the place where you're like, I think I should end it, I don't know, but you're not willing to end it, then the answer is not to just sit there and complain about your partner. The answer is
Yeah.
to work on it. And so that's in therapy. I really don't think that any couple is equipped to work on their relational issues by themselves. You can read a book or take a course and that can be helpful. But
Mm-hmm.
really, I think couples therapy is the best. I really think that we need help. We need somebody else to kind of
I think so
sort
too.
through the bullshit because
Yeah.
there's a lot of it. And
Yeah.
we're all kind of full of shit and are fully invested in it. And we need somebody else to be like, you're full of shit, you're full of shit, you're both full of shit.
I'm
How
not
are we
full
going
of
to make
shit,
this
Todd. I don't know what
work?
you're talking about.
Oh, I'm full of shit.
I'm kidding.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure someone could find a post that says it's time to end your relationship when.
Right.
Um, but I will say, of course, if you feel unsafe physically, emotionally, and the
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
abuse is never a thing to put up with.
Mm-hmm.
Run, don't walk. But um, otherwise, if you want to end I mean, that's what I'm saying is most people, if they want to end a relationship, they just don't,
That's
and they
true.
know.
I'm
And
more on the other
so,
side. So what about
what?
those of us on the other side where we're just like, I'm going to cut and run. I'm out of here. What advice do you have for us?
Go cut and run. I don't know. If that's what you want to do, I mean, then that's sounds like it's an important thing you're responding to internally.
Yeah.
Unless it
But,
isn't.
that's
I don't know.
interesting because it's like I think there is an idea of like what we should do, which is
Yeah.
interesting to work with. Um and I think that the should and the want don't often, or sometimes at least, don't line up. Like I should exit, or I know it's time, but I don't actually want to yet. Or I should stay and like do the work, but I don't actually want to. Um,
Which is why, again, I think, it can be so confusing and that unknown component is so hard to grapple with. And
mhm.
ambivalence is a fucking pain in the ass. So that's why I think going to couples therapy is just so important to help work through some of that stuff.
It is, honestly, because it's like by definition you can't see your own blind spots, and
No.
so I think just having another person who's trained in this stuff, who can see the patterns and help identify what's going on and why, just that awareness is going to help change
It's
things.
so
And whether you
necessary.
decide to stay with this person or not, it's still going to serve you well moving forward.
Mhm.
you know
Totally.
um okay, well, this has been a very interesting discussion. Thank you for being so honest about therapy and your own life and relationships. And if people want to connect with you, if they want to read your book, what is the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Your Nonsense. You can go to my website, toddbaratz.com. You can go to any retailer and order my book, How to Love
Ooh,
Someone Without Losing Your Mind. And yeah, those are all the ways.
awesome. All
Oh,
right,
and I
well,
have a podcast called Our Nonsense.
yes,
I always
that's
forget.
important.
I'm sure there are other things. I have online courses if you want to
Okay.
take. Reach out.
Yeah, we'll put Todd's links in the show notes too. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you for being here and sharing some of your wisdom with people. And we're excited for your book launch.
Thank you for all of your support, Heather. It's really nice to connect with you.
Likewise. Bye, everybody. We'll catch you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the Ask a Sex Therapist podcast. Got a question about spicing things up in the bedroom? Find the answers you're looking for in my Dirty Talk Guide, a free resource for my podcast listeners. Grab yours now at heathershannon.co/dirty talk. Again, that's heathershannon.co/dirty talk. And be sure to tell your partner or friends, because everyone has something they would like to ask a sex therapist.